Good evening. Good evening. My name is Paul Barrett, and I'm the Dean of the College of Business and Economics here at Longwood. I welcome you to the fourth of 4 Executive in Residence programs this academic year, and no kidding, we do save the best for last. With the college's mission of preparing students to be tomorrow's citizen leaders, what better way to help us accomplish this mission than to bring to campus some of the most effective values-based leaders in the world. Tonight's guest speaker is truly a global business leader, and we should all feel very fortunate to have him with us. Our Executive in Residence series began in the year 1991, and it continues to be an exhilarating addition to our curriculum. With the theme of this year's series, Leadership and Innovation, we will be learning more about how American organizations provide valued leadership across the globe. In this regard, tonight's speaker will address risking everything and winning in business on 2 continents. Sponsored by Barrett Capital Management and SunTrust Bank, this year's Executive in Residence series features distinguished and influential business leaders sharing their experiences and insights on entrepreneurship, innovation in product and logistics, and corporate responsibility, including the empowerment of the most precious of all organizational assets, the human capital that spans international boundaries. When I think of our speaker this evening, I'm reminded of the remarks made by Peter Drucker, the independent thinker of politics, business, economics, and society, considered by many to be the founding father of the discipline of modern-day management. Mr. Drucker said, and I quote, "There are many how-to-do-it management books, but very few tell the executive really what to do, let alone why or how." So then just what separates the greatest leaders from the also-rans? As Mr. Drucker pointed out, it's often just 2 things. 1, the focus on opportunity, and 2, the consistent practice of innovation. The organizational leadership literature supports this assertion. Tonight's guest speaker is an amazing example of an executive who has the courage to embrace the power of an idea and how entrepreneurial innovation can create a market, and in doing so change lives and communities, that while they are oceans apart, they are now connected, and they are better off for his dynamic leadership. I know this business leader personally. I met him when we were both broke. It was in the early 1980s when we were both establishing a beachhead for our respective computer software companies. We were competitors, and yet we were drawn together in the world of Wang Laboratories and the genius that was Dr. An Wang. Many of you should know, if not Google it soon when you get out of here, Dr. Wang invented what's called core memory. It is the processing power for computers that has provided the platform for everything technology has evolved into, and I add, so far. Tonight's speaker and I met in different parts of the country from time to time, but mostly in the Wang Laboratories global headquarters in Lowell, Massachusetts. We both grew from our time in working with Dr. Wang, but I also grew personally watching and learning from our guest speaker this evening. What he may not share with you tonight, so I will, is that he started his firm, Information Management Consultants, Inc., in 1981 with the last $2,000 to his name. And then he proceeded to build a global IT services firm, one that has received so many prestigious awards, including the Golden Hammer Award presented by the Vice President of the United States of America. Our speaker himself was singled out by Business Forward as one of the 50 most influential global players in the Washington region. And he received the Entrepreneur of the Year award sponsored by Ernst & Young, NASDAQ, and the Washington Post. In 1996, he was inducted into the University of Connecticut School of Business Hall of Fame. And a year later, in 1997, he was recognized as a distinguished alumnus of the Indian Institute of Technology, IIT, in Bombay, India. Finally, our speaker this evening is one of the most generous men I know. It's a fact. He consistently shares all the learned lessons of his success with others. He's about to do that with everybody in the room again tonight. He is a Peter Drucker executive in action. And I thank him in advance for sharing his story with us this evening. But before our speakers are introduced, I'd like to recognize our financial sponsors. We have with us tonight the CEO of Barrett Capital Management, David Barrett. Would you please stand briefly? I would also like to recognize the Student Sponsoring Association for tonight's event. We're all the brothers of the Kappa Nu chapter of the National Business Fraternity of Delta Sigma Pi. Please stand. Thank you, brothers. All right, thanks, guys. Finally, it is my pleasure to present to you the individual who actually will introduce our guest speaker. Mr. Dustin Black is a senior from Burkeville, Virginia, who will be completing the Bachelor of Science in Business Administration degree in accounting in 2012. As president of Delta Sig, he has been working diligently to manage meetings and activities of a very active fraternity. Now, I've heard the rumor that he may be collaborating with the president of the Dean Student Advisory Board on the next big project for Delta Sigma Pi to reintroduce Dunk the Dean at a booth at the upcoming spring picnic. Well, you don't want to miss that. During his last couple of years, Dustin has worked as a line cook at the Ruby Tuesday restaurant in town. I know, my wife and I go there and say hi. He's also a Student Government Association representative here at Longwood, even as he's maintained a 3.5 GPA. Through each of these activities, Dustin has learned and applied solid leadership and teamwork skills, and he is ready to burn up a track, leading to an upwardly mobile career upon graduation in his chosen fields of accounting. Please join me in welcoming to the podium one of Longwood's best, Mr. Dustin Black.
Thank you, Dean Barrett. Hopefully I won't say anything too repetitive here. He's trying to steal my thunder. So good evening, everybody. We've come here again tonight to lend our ears and minds to a true citizen leader and champion of the business world. Our speaker tonight is the founder, chairman, and CEO of a tremendously innovative and successful IT consulting and solutions company, IMC Incorporated. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Technology and Electrical Engineering from the Indian Institute of Technology, a Master's in Electrical Engineering from the University of Connecticut School of Technology, and a Master's of Business Administration from the University of Connecticut's School of Business. The impressiveness of his long list of professional awards and recognitions is somehow exceeded by that of his active community service and social activity involvement. A small sample of his professional awards and recognitions include being named top 25 most influential people in the high-tech industry by Business Forward's magazine in 2000, being awarded 2004 Executive of the Year by the Northern Virginia GovCon Council, being named both Washingtonian's Power 150 Most Influential People and Washington Life's Magazine 100 Most Influential People in 2007. Some of his displays of community involvement include sitting currently on the Board of Advisors for both George Mason University School of Information Technology and University of Connecticut School of Business. He is also holding a current seat in the Board of Trustees of the American Indian Institution Foundation, whose mission it is to catalyze economic change in India. He was named Citizen of the Year for the Great Falls McLean area in 1999, sat on the University of Connecticut's Foundation Board from 1998 to 2004, and was chairman of the Northern Virginia Technology Council from 2002 to 2005. Our speaker tonight is a frequent speaker and lecturer, and we're lucky to have him here tonight to learn from. So without further ado, on behalf of the Kappa Nu chapter of the International Fraternity of Delta Sigma Pi, the School of Economics and Business here at Longwood University, and the University at large, I'd like to introduce to you Mr. Sudhakar V. Shenoy.
Thank you very much for that very generous introduction. Now, before I start, I'd like to recognize a couple of people here. First, David Fields, I just saw him. There's a little story. He's my accountant. And since 1981, now, you know, he audits a lot of things, but I didn't expect him to be here to audit what I'm talking about. You know? So, David, thank you for coming. He told me he's just moved into Farmville. So he said it wasn't a big deal to come here. So anyway, David, actually, you started working with me in March of 1981, right? Or April, somewhere thereabouts. And to this day, he still works with me. He's my outside accountant who comes in and makes sure that I'm straight and narrow and clean. You know, the topic today is a very interesting one. It's about global businesses and globalization in general. So before I start, I thought I'd tell you a little story. So Lord God one day called this human being, man, and said, hey, listen, he said, I'm going to put you on this planet called Earth. But don't worry, you won't be alone. I'm going to make sure that you'll be able to find a good wife in every corner of the earth. And then guess what he did? He made the earth round. But then along came Tom Friedman, who decided that the earth was flat. So we are back to where we started. Well, having told you that little story, it's a true story, by the way. Let me start by giving you a little story on how we started IMC. And as I had mentioned in 2 or 3 classes that I went to before this morning, it wasn't because money was the motivation. It was always the motivation to do something on our own. You know, we just wanted to be masters of our own destiny. And my most the favorite story on how everything got started, and this is just to show that Providence has strange ways in playing in one's life. I have to tell you my little elevator story. So on day 1, when we started, I went to see IBM. You know, of course, IBM was the 800-pound gorilla in our business, and everybody who started a business wanted to do work for IBM. So I went, and I knew the IBM folks because in my previous generation, I had done some work with them. They really liked me. They thought I was really good at what I did, and I expected them to welcome me with open arms. So I show up at the IBM office on day 1, January 2nd. And I go meet the district manager there, and he says, well, you know, I really like what you do. I have full faith and confidence that you will do a good job for us. But we at IBM have a policy that we will not do business with anybody till they have been in business for at least a year. So the whole meeting lasted 3 minutes. Let me tell you, I was so disappointed. And for a moment, I said, oh, did I do the right thing here? Because I was depending on these guys to give me work. So I took the elevator and I was coming down. And the IBM was on the 13th floor. And the elevator actually stopped on the 2nd floor to either drop somebody or pick up somebody. And as it opened, right there on the wall was a big plaque that said Wang, W-A-N-G. And that morning in the Washington Post, there was an article about how Dr. Wang had become the richest man in America. And I said, oh, that's a computer company too. So I jumped out. And I decided to go meet the guy in charge. So I asked, and there was a guy by the name of Wally Birdseye, you know, and he was the district manager, and he came out to see me. Very nice fellow. I had met him before, and we had done some work also, and I told him, listen, I've started my company, and blah, 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 blah. He said, man, he said, everybody goes upstairs, and nobody comes here. And I'm so happy to see you here. I didn't have the guts, nor the wherewithal to tell him. I just got thrown out upstairs. You know? So I ended up going to see him, and then that started our association with Wang Laboratories. So by the time, you know, I told him what we were capable of doing and all that stuff. And you like this. By the time I went back to my office, which by the way was one little 10 by 12 office with 2 desks and 4 chairs. I think Paul visited me there in one little room. I just had to get an office because otherwise my wife would have felt that I wasn't really working, you know. So I go out there, and my partner said, hey, this guy, Wally Birdseye, wants you to come back. I said, wow, maybe he's got a project for us. So I sat in my car and rushed back to Rosalind, went to see him. He said, Sudhakar, I have a project for you. I was thrilled. And he says, listen, Wang Laboratories put in a proposal for the Internal Revenue Service. And we are supposed to come up with a commissioner's correspondence tracking system, okay? And we have an operational capability demonstration on Monday, and I believe this was either a Thursday or a Friday, and my home office in Lowell, Massachusetts forgot about it. It's a $60 million deal, and it all depends on this little piece of software. If you guys are as good as you claim you are, let's see what you can do between now and Monday. So I said, okay. So I went back and I told my guys, I don't know what you have planned for the weekend. It's all canceled. We're going to work all weekend long. And I have keys to the computer room. And so we sat down and we wrote something that looked like it was all there, And we gave the presentation, and Wang won the largest contract in the history of Wang Laboratories in 1981, which was with and Wally had promised me $5,000 for doing this work over the weekend. And for somebody who had started a company with $2,000, $5,000 was immediately a 250% return on investment over one weekend. So I said, that's great, And after we won the deal, I sent him an invoice for $5,000. And he said, I've got some bad news. I said, what's the bad news? He said, well, I can't pay you $5,000, but you know what? We have a policy here that we have to mark up all our subcontractors by 25%. So I'll give you $4,000. At that time, I wasn't in a mood to argue with him for $1,000, Instead, I thought I would extract some blood from him later on. So he said, I promise you that the next big opportunity is all yours. I said, fair enough. And I got my $4,000. But then the funny thing is that the way we had structured the thing, I had kept ownership of the program. So I asked him, I went to Wally and said, hey, Wally, is it true that every government agency will need this piece of software? Because what it was the software basically tracked correspondence that the head of an agency received from Congress. And they are required to respond back to Congress within a certain period of time. And they receive hundreds of letters on various, he said, yeah, everybody receives. I said, why don't we just package it, put it together with the VS, and sell it, as a fixed price thing to all these, and believe it or not, we packaged it and we priced my software at $15,000. I told him to add his 25 on top of the 15. And we probably sold some 50 or 60 additional systems all over the government, and I made a ton of money for one weekend's worth of work, okay? Isn't this, to me, this was a great country with opportunities. And that too, to take money from the IRS right up front when you start your work, I don't think there's a better way to do it. So what we do now, over the last 30 years or so, we have morphed into different things. We do, technology has moved forward at such a rapid rate that we've had to keep pace. Hire the right kind of people, train them, move on. I still have many of my employees who have been with me for 20, 25 years, and so we've had to kind of reinvent ourselves every so many years. When we started out, and Paul and I were talking, Dean Barrett and I were talking about this today, a computer with 32 megabytes of memory, internal memory, with an external removable disk of 2.2 megs, cost $100,000 with one terminal. And it had a matrix printer that went 180 characters per minute, I think it was, yeah. So it would go pit, 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 And so today, of course, my little telephone here has 32 gigabytes of memory, and God knows how much processing power it has, and I can literally do everything on it, So things have changed. So with that, so has my business. About 80% of my business is right now in the healthcare world, and it's pure. I didn't do it on purpose. And have you guys watched that movie called what's his name? He's the guy who comes across everything by accident. No. It'll come to me. Anyway, he's finally goes into the shrimping business. What's that? Forrest Gump. So I call myself, the Forrest Gump, because I just fall into things and things happen. It's half jokingly at least. So back in 1990 something, I sat right next to, I had sponsored an event for cancer research. And I happened to sit right next to, we had a table up front, and the NIH or whoever was doing the other side called me and said, can you give up 2 seats at your table for our researchers? And I said, sure, send them in. And they sent these 2 young ladies, really young, and I thought, oh, they put some junior people at my table, So I said hi to them and figured there's not much that they and I could talk about. So shortly thereafter, Cokie Roberts of television fame gets up to give a talk, and she was just been diagnosed with cancer. And she talks about how this one woman has come up with some revolutionary way of, diagnosing cancer, etc. And that she was one day going to get a Nobel Prize, and she flashed a picture of hers, and she was sitting at my table. So I looked there, and I looked at her, and I said, that's you. So she said, yep. So I don't know who was sitting next to me. I said, hey, do you mind just getting up and going there and having her sit with me? So this young lady came and sat with me, and we started talking about what her work was and all. And I was interested to see what she was doing. And this was around 1997, 98. And the next day she called me and said, hey, would you like to come see my lab and see what I do? So I said, sure. So I show up at NIH, and she shows me what she does and stuff like that. And we became pretty good friends. And she educated me on this whole healthcare industry. And I figured that sooner or later that was going to be a major IT arena. But I didn't know how to break into it, because most of my work was for, the mundane stuff for State Department or Commerce Department, doing, business-oriented software. So until one day she called me and she said, I have some bad news and some good news, So I said, okay, give me the bad news first, so I can, forget it with the good news, So she says, well, bad news is I'm leaving NIH. And I'm going over to, and I said, so what's the good news? She said, well, I've been appointed as the director of the Salk Institute in California. And those of you who don't know the Salk Institute, Jonas Salk was the guy who invented the polio vaccine. And the Salk Institute, one of the 3 leading medical research centers in the world. So I was very high, and she also said she was going as a professor. By the way, this woman was in her early 30s, and she did her MD, PhD by the time she was like 20. And she's a genius. So she goes over there, and about 5 or 6 months later, she calls me up and she says, oh, this is a tough job. So I said, why? She says, well, I didn't know that I had to raise money to do my research, So I said, oh, that's a tough job, and I wish I could help you, but I'm still a poor immigrant. So she says, well, I have a proposal into NIH, can you help me? And I said, well, I don't know anybody at NIH. But here's the funny part. I was very active in my alumni association, and there was a general there by the name of General Zenowitz, who had been appointed by Secretary of Defense Cohen to write a paper on bioterrorism, because there had been an attack in the Japanese underground railroad with some nerve gas, and they were afraid that something like that could happen here. So he was given the task, and he's one of the original guys who founded FEMA. And he's an alum of the University of Connecticut. And being great basketball fans, we used to get together every so often to watch UConn go all the way to the Final Four and win the tournament. I had to put that in here. So I called him up and I said, hey, you've been thinking of doing this paper. I think I have just the right kind of solution for you. And I described this woman's work, and he said, maybe we can solve this genetically. I said, yeah, I think you can. So he said, can she come and talk to me? I said, yeah. So I called her. She flew in from California. We had lunch. And he said, young lady, and this guy is like in his late 70s back then. He says, give me your proposal that you gave to NIH. I'll see what I can do. So how much money do you need? She said, about $2.5 million. So about 30 days later, he found her twice as much. Now, the problem was that the technology in that area wasn't going forward. So she calls me, she comes here, she used to come here every 6 weeks, and at one of those things she said, hey, I have a real serious problem. I said, what? So it takes me 3 weeks to do one single genetic comparison, because the database is so big, and computers have to chug along. It takes 3 weeks to do it. I said, oh, there's something wrong. So I go to Walmart, Kmart, I give my credit card, my whole life history shows up for the last 5 years. And their database has billions of records in it, so there must be something wrong. So I got her to come to my office the next day. We sat down, we brainstormed it, and came up with a solution which reduced it to where she could do those comparisons for under 5 minutes. And I kept the ownership of the software. I did it for free for her. And then we sold it for several $1 million to her. That got me into the biotech industry. And before I knew it, I was getting phone calls saying, can you come and help us here, help us there. So it was just plain dumb luck. Imagine if I hadn't got out of that elevator, I wouldn't have become a Wang person. If I hadn't sat next to her at the, cancer research gala, I'd probably still be, I don't know what I would be doing, I wouldn't be in front of you for sure. So I'm a great believer in the Forrest Gump story. Yeah. So actually, UConn did a big story, and they called me, is he the Forrest Gump? It's just there's a big center spread on that. So, so that's what we do now. 80% of my business is in the healthcare industry. We are in about 16 different agencies of the National Institutes of Health, and we help research happen using information technology. The other 20% is with private organizations, Fortune 500 companies, hospitals, pharmaceutical companies, all doing work with managing content. If you just think about it, everybody is collecting data about everybody else. And there's the volume of data that's going on computers is growing exponentially. Okay, so people have to find out what to do with that data. So we decided a few years ago that we are going to be the best we can be in that sphere, which is content management. And so that's what we do. We help companies manage content. We'll do analytics on the data they have. We also have a proprietary piece of software which removes rot. ROT stands for redundant, obsolete, and trivial information. Now, a little known fact is that, I'll give you an example, my favorite example. If I was to produce a slideshow today and had 10 slides using Microsoft PowerPoint, for example, my normal tendency would be to send it to 4 or 5 of my colleagues and say, hey, what do you think of this presentation? I'm going to talk about this at Longwood University. Well, since I'm the CEO, they all feel obligated to write some response back, So they'd say, oh, I would change this. So now, all of a sudden, there's 11 copies of that system on my network. And if each, packet takes about 30 or 40 megs, you're talking about 500 megabytes just in one go-around. Then if I incorporate everybody's changes and send it back to them, now there are 16 copies, and there's probably 600 or 700 megabytes worth of information there. All but the last copy is relevant. The rest is all redundant. So that's the R. And one other thing we found is that when people leave organizations, companies very rarely delete the information that the other person leaves behind. And this sits there for years and years and years. And so much so that there's a lot of obsolete information on this system. That's the O of it. And then, how many of you never receive a joke? Well, we all do, right? Sometimes dozens a day. And we look at it, we laugh, and we still keep it there. Because someday we're going to tell that joke and I want to get back to it, So we all keep it there. It's trivial information. It doesn't make any sense. Yet, 2 independent consulting organizations have done a study and said that even though you can buy a terabyte now for $100 at Costco, it still costs a company $30,000 a year to maintain a terabyte worth of information. So we are now hired by several top companies to come in and analyze their data and remove the rot. So for example, for a large financial institutions right here in our neck of the woods here, they gave us 30 terabytes as an experiment, and we found 17.2 terabytes of rot. Multiply that by 30,000, that's almost $500,000 worth of savings a year. Also, then they said we got lucky, so they gave us 50 more, and we found 28 terabytes of rot. So that's the kind of stuff that we do. And while we are doing that, we also analyze their data to tell them what pieces of it they ought to be protecting. So we gave a presentation somewhere, and the Defense Department, the Joint Chiefs of Staff actually called us in and said, hey, we want you to come look at our data. We went in, and within 5 minutes they threw us out because we were able to take out, using that system, information that they ought to protect. So while we are doing the search for rot, we also build these meta tags that basically protect information for. Am I boring you guys with all this technology? Well, I'll go to some interesting things. Anyway, so that's the other thing that we do, and it's a fascinating piece of business. Now, in 1981, one of the things that we decided was that we ought to be doing a lot more work in India. Having graduated from a fairly decent school there, I knew the caliber of people that were there. So. And at that time, we used to do a lot of work with commercial organizations. I hardly did any business with the federal side, except for while I was a partner with Wang. So I went there, met up with a friend of mine who was a classmate, who had formed and encouraged him to form a software company. And I said, I tell you what, I'll keep your people busy, And that was our first foray into software in India. Now, the funny part was, we didn't have a means of transporting the software written from there to here. I mean, there was no such thing as an internet where you could attach a file and send it out, okay? So you know what we did? We had a courier. He would sit on an airplane, come here with a diskette. I would go to the airport, take it from him, and he would turn around, sit on an airplane, and go back. So it's an 18-hour flight, He got paid well. He didn't care. He could sleep on the airplane, But that's how this global software development started, believe it or not. So, we've come a long ways now. I have an office in Pune, India, and we talk to them. We even look at each other while we are talking to them. So, most of the software developed there is, with the push of a button, it shows up here. So, but there are problems. Globalization is not, the term sounds really good. We have rising costs. People are getting smart there, and they realize that I'm paying $25 or $30 a square foot over here for my office, and over there I'm paying 50 cents a square foot. So they're getting smart and saying, oh, you know what, you can afford a little bit more. And unfortunately, so costs are going up. The United States has so many rules and regulations for people doing business outside. One of the most fearsome ones is called the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. I don't know how many of you are familiar with it, but if my company is involved in corruption outside the country, I could go to jail. So I'm very concerned about that and I make everybody sign that they'll never bribe anybody, and we don't do that. And one of the funny things that happened several years ago was that I was talking to a very influential politician in India. And they asked me, so what do you think we should be doing, in order to attract more investment into India? So I had to give her an explanation. And I said, listen, tell me what you're really proud of in India. And this person said, well, our software industry, we have grown from nothing to hundreds of thousands of people working in this industry. So I said, why do you think your industry was so successful? He said, because, Indians are smart, they are good in math, science, logic, and that's what software is all about. So I said, let me tell you honestly, I've been in the US now for several decades, and the people here are just as smart, just as bright, and if anything, they're more innovative. But let me tell you why India has become very successful in the software industry. Software is something that you can't touch, feel, or see. Once you compile it, it's invisible. And you press a button and it shows up here these days, okay? With the result that the bureaucrats got no chance to put their dirty hands on what that industry was doing. So it grew and grew and grew, and nobody knew what was happening till it was too late. And now it is so big, they can't control it anymore, and they are everywhere. So I said, there's a lesson in it for you. Take away all your regulations, reduce the size of your government, and you'll see that people are so good. And I know that Mr. David Barrett is shaking his head furiously, saying, I totally agree with you, buddy. And that's what is required. The government has to step out, and people are geniuses at finding ways of solving problems. And I think that is what is required. And we have done different things to adapt to our situations. And as technology changes, innovations take place, it is imperative for companies like mine to keep pace. And that is one of our biggest challenges in this whole field. The first time I came in 1970 from India, it took me over 3 days to get here. And I had to stop in 2 different places, overnight, because the flights were few and far between. Today, I can go to Newark, take a flight, and 16.5 hours later, I'm in India. It's a direct flight. So airplanes can go 10,500 miles with no problem. So that's how small the world has become. Forget the fact that I can push a button and talk to anybody I want for free using FaceTime, on iPads. The world has changed. One of the things that is going to become critical going forward is young talent. And nothing against older guys, I'm right there too. So, talent like the ones I saw in today's classes, that really thinks out of the box and starts having an innovative mind, because that is what is going to keep this country number one, innovation. And doing business abroad, again, there are so many pitfalls, and yet there are great rewards too, FCPA being one of them. Finally, I think it is imperative for every entrepreneur to give back to the community, and I preach it and I try to live up to it. And in India, we have started a little organization called the Center for Innovation. 4 years ago when we started, we had about 5 students and 1 professor, and today we have over 100 students and about I believe like 5 or 8 professors who guide these students in thinking out of the box. And I don't want to go into all the details of the wonderful things they do, but I go there 4 times a year and sit in on meetings, just listening to the kids come up with ideas. And they do this not for credits, but just on their own time, just to learn how to invent things. And it's a fascinating concept. The other thing is, you kids who are going to graduate this year or next year, you have to realize that the person sitting next to you is not necessarily your competition. It's somebody sitting in Bangalore or Beijing. I think Tom Friedman said it well in his book, It's a Flat World. It's that kid who's going to compete against you, because there's no barriers. There might be physical boundaries, but electronically there are no barriers. They can do just about anything we do out here. So we have to be really, cognizant of that fact and keep pace with what's happening. Here's another thing. American universities are setting up campuses in India. Virginia Tech has just gotten 75 acres of land in Chennai, and they're going to have a Virginia Tech Chennai campus. And they're going to have exchange of professors, and they're actually going to award a Virginia Tech degree for people in India. Okay, so tell me, if you're looking for a job, and you have a Virginia Tech degree from the United States, and there's a kid in India who's looking for a job, and the job happens to be in Spain or France or UK, you both have a Virginia Tech degree. So your competition is not really the kid who's sitting next to you in your classroom. It's that kid over there who's also getting a Virginia Tech degree. Johns Hopkins is doing that, I was told. MIT is in talks with several of the IITs to set up a joint program. So it's going to be a very homogeneous kind of a crowd, that for which employers will be able to pick up talent. In many ways, I'm glad I'm much older than you guys, and I'm getting older, because I tell you what, I don't know how I would face up to all the competition that's coming up, but also on the other hand, you guys have great tools at your hand to face up to that competition. I mean, newer computers, and this is this is without a shadow of a doubt the greatest country on earth. I don't know any country, and I've been to dozens of them, where there are as many opportunities that we have in this country. You have to think of how best to attack those opportunities. And the educational system here, regardless of which university or college you graduate from, is very similar. I mean, they follow the same curriculums, they have the same good professors, and the educational system here, at least at the college level, is superior to anything I've seen anywhere, and I think that's a great thing. So I have great hope that my grandchildren, and I have 2 of them, will lead a better life than we do, because the people in this country will always prevail over the competition, regardless of what those guys do out there in what's that called? The House and the Senate and the 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. So anyway, with that, thank you very much for inviting me to come here and speak to you, and I can take any questions you have. Okay. Oh. You asked me that question this morning too, but go ahead.
You mentioned a lot about having to keep pace with the flow and the change of the information technology field.
Yep.
And I was curious because from how I understand it, a company finds a niche, and over the next few years, every company floods that and all tries to get into it. So then you have to find a new one. How many years does that cycle cover? Like, how often does your company have to kind of define a new specialty?
Well, I don't think we've ever tried to look for a new specialty because there was a lot of competition in there. I'll tell you, when I started my company, I had a great job. I was making quite a bit of money. And when I started this, I had no idea where the next paycheck was going to come from. So a lot of my friends that I used to hang out with thought I was crazy. And they said, do you know how many companies there are around the Beltway that do the same thing? So I said, oh, I never thought of that. How many? Said, it's probably over 2,500 companies around the Beltway. And I said, really? I said, wow. He said, yeah, man, how are you going to beat all those guys out? I said, I think I just have to be better than they are. And everybody was doing the same thing. And I did find a niche, and the niche happened to be Wang Laboratories. And I was the best that, at least I like to think so, best at what I did. And with the result that Wang consistently came to me, and I became the largest single developer of software for Wang Laboratories in the whole world. It was a great niche for me. And it's not, they had 760 plus partners, but I was number 1. So it's, there's always going to be competition in no matter what you do, there's going to be competition. But I think the way you separate yourself from is being the best amongst your peers. And isn't that true in your class? I mean, how many people do you have in your class? They're all really good, right? Otherwise, they wouldn't be here. I read somewhere that you have to maintain a 3.2 to 3.6 GPA to come into this university. Your SATs have to be between 1150 and 1200 something. That's a pretty tough number. And so all of you are really bright people. You didn't shirk from the competition, did you? You went up against it, right? Same thing in the business life, you know. I mean, no matter what I do, I'm sure there's going to be competition. So I might as well brace for it and do the very best job I can and make sure that my customer is always happy.
Just wanted to ask a question about privacy. One of the matters that Congress is looking at is the controversy of protecting the rights of individuals. The motion picture industry wants to have a backdoor access to control content. People like Google say no. They lobbied strongly recently not to have that happen. And you're in the business of helping to manage content. What is your protecting our rights as citizens versus the tremendous access people have to looking? You mentioned examples of your credit card. What are your feelings on that issue?
Well, I tell you what, one of the things that has made this country so great is the fact that we can keep our identity to ourselves. And for me, that's very important. Okay, I really worry about that, you know, because I'll tell you what, for every protective, what you call schema you come up with, there's somebody on this side who will break it. Okay, I don't care how much Google tries to protect it, there's some smart Mark Zuckerberg out there who will figure out a way to break it. So the only thing that can stop someone from doing that is to have strict laws that says, hey, we know you can break it, but if you do, you're going to be punished. You know, banks have great safes, but tell me how many times have people gone in and broken banks, right? History is full of them, all the way from Bonnie and Clyde down to, you know, today's era. You know, people dig tunnels and go inside them, but that doesn't mean that it's right. You know, we catch those people and punish them. And that should be the philosophy even when we go after protecting privacy, you know, in the cyberspace. And that's my feeling, you know. That, and my business, my individuality is my most sacred possession. And I think, you know, we should have very strict laws to protect that. Gosh, that's a tough one. I know I started in 1981. I don't think I got in on any boards till probably in the mid-90s. You know, I mean, even today, I get off boards when I see that I'm overwhelmed. For me, my first #1 job is the work that I do, my business. Okay, everything else is secondary. And I'm pretty honest with people about that. And I tell them, listen, I'll do whatever I can as long as my business doesn't suffer. Because there are hundreds of people who depend on me to make sure that they have a job tomorrow. And I can't go there just because I'm a little bit more financially secure and do things just because I like doing it. You know, I'd love to play golf every day, you know, but I don't. I only play on weekends, and that too in the morning because my wife objects if I'm not home by 9:30. You know, so I can't always do what I want to do. You know, because running the business and making sure that it's on solid ground is job #1. You know, so it all depends on the type of business you have and what stage of the business it is in, what kind of staff you have to backfill some of your things, you know. So there are many factors. I don't think there's a one firm answer to that, you know. But everybody should give some amount of time to causes that don't necessarily make them money, but, you know, that are good for society in general. I didn't tell anybody, except my wife. And I think the only reason I told her that was because I had a mortgage and a car payment and food to put on the table. My 2 girls were too young to go to school. And so I told her I need $611 a month. And she had to earn it. And she had never had a job. So she went in for 2 or 3 interviews and came back without giving the interview because she was too scared. So finally I went with her and sat outside. And she gave the interview, got the job as a bank teller. And, she brought in 600. I wanted 611. She brought in, I think, 613 or 614, And about 6 months later, when we were pretty, stable, I said, okay, you can give up your job. I've never heard somebody give a sigh of relief that was so big. So, yeah, of course I was nervous, but I also realized that the $2,000 ain't going to take me far in life. It was one of those things where, do you watch that, what's that game called poker, right? Where, the guy says, I'm all in. And that's what I did. I took my 2,000 and said, I'm all in. I just happened to get, what's the royal flush? So, yes, absolutely. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I totally agree. Yeah. Yes. But he has a very good point, and actually I did bring it up at one of the classes where that same question was asked this morning. One of the things that I had going for me was that I was very well educated. I knew I could always get a job, doing what I was doing, simply because I was in the computer field. I was, at least people told me I was a very good programmer. I could do just about anything I wanted to do with a computer. And so I knew that if this thing didn't work, I could pick up my phone and my old employer would take me back. As a matter of fact, they told me, oh, you can always come back, And so I had that at the back of my mind, that even if I fail, I can just pick up my phone and go work somewhere else. Absolutely right. And that's why a good education is very important. And I'll tell you what, I worked for 8 years before I started my company. So I'm not a risk taker. If somebody tells you that an entrepreneur is a risk taker, they're not telling you the whole truth. What entrepreneurs are people who know how to measure the risk and then decide whether that risk has a greater chance of succeeding than failing. Okay, so it's that which separates a successful entrepreneur from one that is not so successful. Every day, I get people coming in saying, we have to go after this deal or that deal or blah 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 blah. And the questions I ask is, okay, how much effort is it going to take? And what are we shooting for? So, and can I afford it? Do we have it budgeted? All those things can be worked out. But, in your heart of hearts, what you're really doing is evaluating your risk. And you're saying, can I live with this risk if it should fail? Okay? And that's what people have to do. It's not blind faith that, some divine power is going to make me successful. Okay? I always said my prayers in the morning, trust me, saying, oh, God, I hope I win this contract, stuff like that. But on the other hand, I took measured risks. So even when I started the company, I knew that if it didn't work for a certain number of months, I could go back and get a job. Because I was very highly qualified, like he said.
I have another question.
Yes. Man, you know everything about me. What question are you going to ask?
These are questions I've never asked.
Okay.
How did you feel 5 years later?
Well, I don't think that, I'm ever comfortable with my state in life. okay, whether it was 5 years later or whether it is 31 years later. I recommend that everybody read a book called Only the Paranoid Survive. You know, and it was written by Andy Grove, who was the founder and the first CEO of Intel. It's a small book. I bought it for all my management people, and I make them read it. It's only about 75 pages. I can read it in, in an hour at the most. Okay, and I think it's must reading if you're going to go and become an entrepreneur, because it says that the day that you stop feeling afraid, you're going to lose. Because the only thing that keeps you going is that fear of failure. So to answer your question, 5 years later, I felt a lot better because I had a few extra bucks in my pocket, but I was still always afraid. Every time we lost a contract or we didn't win one that we really wanted to win, even to this date, I'm like, I hope this is not a trend, And I get everybody together and say, all right, guys, let's analyze why we lost this one. We shouldn't have lost it, but we lost it. Why did we lose it? Can we do something so next time we won't lose it, So it's that kind of fear that keeps an entrepreneur on his toes, So fear is a great, great motivator. Yes, sir.
They were talking about hacking, people hacking into computers, and there was some kind of big thing back in like 2001 where the name of it was the Red something, I forget the title, but it was some kind of thing where it was an attack, a hacking attack on the internet or something, and this show was talking about whoever it was, that they were able to trace it back to a main frame computer in Moscow. And how vulnerable are our computers, like in the Pentagon, and their deal with if the president presses the button for nuclear retaliatory strike, let's say Russia attacks us and we try to retaliate. How do we know that our computers would work? Could it be that they've been sabotaged already?
All that is possible. There have been a couple of movies that I have seen. All that is possible, and we just hope that the redundancies in the system will prevent that from happening. Especially for systems like that, I'm sure they have secondary, tertiary, systems of backup, of what you call support that will ensure that if that president pushes a button, that things will happen,
I have another question. This thing called WikiLeaks.
Yes.
Some soldier was able to give away. He got access to like 100,000 or 700,000 documents. How could a rational government allow a soldier to get all that information when he has no need to have that information?
We don't know that. We don't know what he did. There are a lot of people, in the Pentagon that handle very sensitive information, and they go through all these background checks and all that. Everybody comes out clear, but you still don't know what motivates somebody like that to betray his country. I mean, I think that's because he was probably given access to it. There are a lot of people who have access.
You being a man that knows this stuff, aren't there people in the government that know enough to keep information like that from being accessed so easily?
I'm sure that there are, but who knows how he did it. He probably did it over many, many months and many, many years. He probably didn't do it all of a sudden. It's like that, the cashier who takes, a couple of bucks every day from the till. okay, and works there for 20 years and has taken out tens of thousands of dollars, and suddenly somebody realizes and says, oh my God, this person stole, thousands of dollars from the till. Well, it just happened a couple of bucks at a time. And he could have done the same thing, he could have taken 10 documents a week. Who knows how he did it. But he's under investigation. I believe they're prosecuting him, and all that will come out. And you can bet that, the systems have been tightened up since then. So, thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. We got a couple gifts.
Thank you. Oh, my God. Thank you.
On behalf of the College of Business and Economics at Longwood University, I'd like to present this gift to you.
Thank you.
For coming out
Thank you very much. It was fun. Thank you.
I got one more.
Okay. Uh-oh.
We started this a few years ago,
Okay.
Sudhakar. This is an actual home run baseball hit over the fence by one of our Lancer baseball players, Matthew Dickinson. He is a pre-business major and a sophomore. Is Matthew in the audience today? No? It's all right. Probably working out for the next home run. And because we're giving this home run baseball to you today because we feel what you did all day today for the students in the classroom, our lunch today with the students, and certainly tonight was clearly a home run.
Oh, thank you so much. Now, thank you. I do see my name is printed here.
Yes.
So you must have had a premonition that it would be a home run.
We knew it. I knew.
Yeah.
Sudhakar, I've seen you hit grand slams before, so I knew tonight would be an easy home run for you.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's what friends are for, right? To make you feel good. Thank you.
Thank
you very
all
much.
for coming.